Hello! Thank you for watching my presentation. I hope that you will find the topic not only interesting, but also applicable and beneficial to the future of training in the workplace. Today, we will be discussing training across the generations. This presentation by Allison Griffin is put together for Dr. Sanchez's Emerging Issues in Human Resource Training class at Amberton University. For the current study, this presentation will discuss an introduction to the topic of training different generations. Next, we will look at previous research and studies that have been conducted to establish the defining events and characteristics of each generation, the learning preferences of each generation, and the best training practices for trainers working with each generation. We will then discuss the methodology used here. We will also compare and contrast articles and what they have to say about the millennial generation. The current researcher will give opinions about the research that has been compiled here. Finally, we will close with a conclusion in which we will talk about how this research affects the modern workplace, suggestions for trainers working with different generations, and final remarks. There are 5 generations participating in the workforce in recent years. These include the traditionalists, also known as the silent generation, born from the year 1925 through 1945. The baby boomers, also known as boomers, born from the year 1946 through 1964. Generation X, or Gen Xers, born from 1965 through 1980. The millennials, also known as Generation Y, or Echo boomers, born from 1981 to 1995. And finally, the digital natives, or Generation Z, born in the year 1996 or later. The changing trends between the generations are seen as gradual change rather than an abrupt shift at the birth year cutoffs. So understanding the dissimilarities between generations is very valuable information for organizations, especially when one is trying to work with people from multiple generations at the same time. Because of the many differences, employers, trainers, or even teachers must use certain strategies to proficiently reach each generation. Although many researchers do not agree on the exact time frame that defines each generation's birth year range, a generation usually refers to a group of people who have experienced similar life events, while age refers to individual differences caused by maturation, life stage, or developmental factors. In this presentation, we will focus mainly on the baby boomers, Generation Xers, and millennials because these 3 generations make up the majority of the workforce today. However, we will briefly discuss both the traditionalists and the digital natives. First, the traditionalists only constitute 5% of the workforce as of 2015. This generation is characterized as those who grew up in the Great Depression and World War II. They tend to value frugality, they are patriotic and loyal, they adhere strictly to rules, they are loyal to their employers, and often sacrifice for the good of others. Not much is known yet about this new generation called the digital natives. However, many have had the opportunity to have a lifelong use of modern technology and communication venues such as the internet, text messages, social media, and cell phones. From what is known about the generation, they seem to be more socially and environmentally aware than previous generations. They are technologically savvy, socially connected, they have higher IQs than generations before them, and they're generally accepting of diverse populations. They are the most homeschooled generation since modern public schools and require less direction because of all the information easily accessed at their fingertips through modern technology. Baby boomers are labeled as such because they were born in a baby boom following World War II. Some of the life events they experienced together are that they are the first generation with television. They attended college in record numbers, making them the most educated generation compared to any previous one. They are projected to live longer than any previous generation, in part because they lived in an era in which new scientific and medical advancements were made every day. They lived through the Vietnam War. They resisted the draft. They were known for marches on Washington protesting the war. For a variety of reasons, baby boomers are working long past the age of retirement, which ends up having a negative impact on the careers of the following generations. The baby boomers are a generation characterized as ambitious workaholics. They're critical of people with opposing opinions, time-stressed, materialistic. They value social conscientiousness and independence. They are competitive and hardworking. They are concerned with the fair treatment of everyone, and they are rigid in conforming to rules. Known as the skeptical generation, Generation Xers' early years were marked by tragedy and disappointment through events such as the Challenger explosion, the Clinton-Lewinsky scandal, the first U.S. gas shortages, and the price of gold soaring. The divorce rate doubled while Xers were growing up, so they came from broken homes more so than the generations before them. Women began working outside of the home more often. Xers were also known as latchkey kids because they were often left to their own devices by workaholic or absentee parents. They were growing up when Americans first became aware of the threat of terrorism. There was a significant culture decline because of the media broadcasting of AIDS, child abductions, and drug wars. They also lived through the birth of the internet, cell phones, digital communication, and video games. Generation Xers are suggested to be more skeptical, impatient, and cynical. They value informality and practicality. They often seek a work-life balance and may be the first generation to do so. They dislike close supervision and are more independent than other generations. Xers prefer flexibility to rules and do not adhere as strictly as previous generations. They prefer to work independently without meetings or group work. Generation Xers are also more extrinsically motivated by salary and materialistic things than any other generation. Millennials have seen an unprecedented technical revolution and were raised around modern technology such as computers at home and school. They grew up with parents who were often frightened and protective. Because of this, millennials were involved in every sport, club, and extracurricular activity, resulting in over-socialization and very little unsupervised alone time. They were coached, praised, and encouraged for participation rather than accomplishments. Millennials also experienced life events such as the Columbine high school shootings, Desert Storm in Iraq, the impeachment of President Bill Clinton, the 2001 terrorist attacks, and the continuing war on terror. They have grown up with terrorism and fear that is reinforced in gory detail by the media 24/7. Because of these shared life events, millennials have been recorded as having many characteristics, some of which contradict each other, but we'll get to that later. According to some research, millennials can be seen as more narcissistic, unmotivated, disrespectful, cynical, and disloyal, while they are also seen as socially conscious, optimistic, technologically savvy, team-oriented, ethnically diverse, highly educated, globally aware, and able to multitask. Research also suggests that millennials tend to be more confident, trusting, sheltered, and pressured to excel than any other generation before them. They are also eager to please those around them, whether it is a peer, supervisor, or subordinate. Researchers may not agree on every characteristic of this generation, but future research may be able to better establish the characteristics of this generation as they continue to grow in the workforce. In order to successfully train these three generations, the trainer must be aware of the learning preferences of each. As for baby boomers, they prefer hands-on, application-focused training techniques that help them absorb new information and skills. It would benefit them to practice new techniques or information after learning them. Baby boomers respond negatively towards an authoritarian style of teaching. They also prefer to know concrete benefits of the training they are participating in. As for Generation Xers, they prefer not to read as much as other generations. They are more likely to use a computer rather than a book to learn new information. Generation Xers best learn by actively doing something, so training events such as role-play scenarios are well liked. Xers also prefer immediate feedback on their job performance in order to improve. In the classroom setting, they prefer interactive learning, plenty of visual aids, and anything that stimulates their multitasking skills. One of the most important learning preferences of Xers, however, is that they can participate in self-directed learning opportunities. Millennials are highly interactive when it comes to learning. They prefer learning that is designed for interaction, teamwork, and conversations. They prefer to use technology because of their extensive abilities with it, while they also enjoy reading more than Generation Xers. Millennials also prefer extensive scheduling so they may get things done in a shorter period of time. They prefer to learn the easiest, fastest, most direct route to a solution. If trainers are able to provide the benefits of training, millennials are the most motivated learners of the generation. This generation sees a direct link from education to advancing their careers and an increased salary, and therefore prefer as many training or education opportunities as possible. They prefer training to be on demand from interactive and entertaining sources. Research suggests that the best training practices for baby boomers include treating them as equals without acting as an authority figure, using storytelling and anecdotes to relate to them in a friendly way, providing an environment for an open discussion, and showing them they are a valued asset to the company and valued as a person. Research also suggests incorporating practical and fun activities that allow team or group work. A trainer should also organize training materials so that the baby boomer trainees can easily access the information discussed or additional information as needed. According to past research, it is suggested that trainers working with Generation Xers are efficient in getting to the point, avoid cliches and hyperboles, use modern and updated technology, build plenty of activities into the training event, give them freedom, autonomy, and independence, and use humor. A trainer should communicate the benefits of training and clearly establish the expectations from the beginning. In the same way, millennials also prefer clear, upfront expectations. Research suggests that trainers working with millennials should provide a clear structure for what should be learned, which may include an outline, syllabus, learning objectives, study guide, and how they will be evaluated. Trainers should inform millennials why the training matters, how it can relate to their personal and professional lives, and how the training relates to the big picture. Millennials respond well when they are rewarded for efficiency. They want trainers who move quickly through the information, using technology in fun and entertaining ways. Researchers suggest trainers give feedback, supervision, direction, and attention when working with this generation. Millennials prefer team interaction and hands-on activities where they are able to exchange information verbally or via texting. Literature and past research for the current study topic were gathered through the methods of online scholarly journals, found mostly through EBSCOhost's search engine, printed textbooks, personal communication or interviews with a training executive of a Fortune 500 company, and training policies and procedures from the same company's training manuals and other training literature. As mentioned earlier, some research discussing millennials contradicts each other. Let's take a minute to compare and contrast a couple of these articles that describe millennials. Two very interesting articles were the article by Constanza, Badger, Fraser, Sivert, and Gade, written in 2012, and the article by Farrell and Hurt in 2014. The first article focused on the universal characteristics that most millennials tend to have, while the second article focused on why this generation acts the way they do, crediting similar life events that all millennials have lived through and experienced. These articles agree on a few things about millennials, such as describing them as technologically savvy, ethnically diverse, the generation with a higher education level than any previous generation, and the largest generation after the baby boomers. However, these studies also list characteristics of the millennials that contradict each other. For example, Constanza et al. Describes the generation as being more narcissistic, while Farrell and Hurt found them to be socially conscious and aware of people around them. The first article also accuses the millennials as being unmotivated, while the second article claims they are not only motivated to do one task, but instead they prefer to multitask. And finally, the first research team found millennials to be more disrespectful and the second described millennials to be more team-oriented and focus on what's best for everyone in the group. So why are there such conflicting opinions of this generation? And how might this relate to the research on learning preferences? This researcher has a few opinions to share on that matter. The two articles previously discussed show that one study cannot effectively describe an entire generation of people. Their characteristics, along with their learning preferences, have more to do with the individual than the generation as a whole. Rowe mentioned in her 2008 study that millennials prefer training that is interactive and entertaining. While I agree that sounds more fun, it is also important to point out the value of a lecture. As a member of the millennial generation, this researcher can say with certainty that depending on the content of the training, a simple slideshow or lecture would be just as informative and more effective at passing along concrete, explicit knowledge than a training session full of games or role-playing situations. It is true that updated technology is valuable and convenient, but using a blackboard and a piece of chalk can get the information out there in a way that benefits the employees and the company by saving time and money. As a student who took a number of self-paced independent study classes online, it is easy to see the value of self-directed learning that fits into your schedule. This researcher's personal preferences may not be the norm for the generation, but the point is, not everyone in a generation has the same characteristics or learning preferences. When a trainer is working with multiple generations at the same time, the most important thing is to know the people, not the generations. Although this research on different generations is helpful, it is not there to generalize or stereotype people. So you may be wondering, how does this research affect the modern workplace? How can companies apply this information? First, we have established the training styles that would be best to reach each generation. Baby boomers would prefer corporate-style training in which there is not a lot of modern technology, learning materials are organized and easily accessed, and the atmosphere allows for open discussions and storytelling. Generation Xers prefer self-sustained training that is independent and has a clear benefit to them. They want something that is effective and to the point. Millennials require constant training with a clear structure. They want something quick and efficient with social interactions. Trainers must be prepared to work with all generations at one time because the workforce is very spread out. There are even members of the traditionalists and digital natives trickling in and out of the workforce. With baby boomers, the largest generation, also leaving the workforce in record numbers, companies will need to focus more efforts on training than ever before. Because of the need for constant training departments will need to be fully staffed and focus on not only training new employees, but continually updating the training for all employees throughout the company. So here are some suggestions for future trainers. First, baby boomers do not care about technology, so the best way to reach them is through face-to-face training. Set up structured classroom times to meet and discuss the training content with baby boomers. Do not act like a superior, but instead like an equal. Allow time for sharing stories, experiences, and opinions. Second, Generation Xers want independent training that is self-directed. Allow for training content to be easily accessed through technology and on their own time. Do not set deadlines or training requirements, but instead allow them to access training when they need it or see it as applicable to their job. Third, millennials look for the most updated technology, mentorships, and team-oriented activities. So set up training events that are fun and entertaining with new technology and social interactions. Also allow the opportunity for mentor relationships with others who have the knowledge and experience needed for the millennials to complete their jobs. This guidance will help push them in the right direction without being too demanding. And here you will find a list of references used throughout the presentation. Thank you for your time today, and I appreciate you watching my presentation. I hope you learned something that you can take back to your company and use to enhance your training programs.